Hello and welcome to the European Respiratory Journal podcast. My name is James Chalmers and I'm the chief editor of the European Respiratory Journal. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to November's podcast. And this month, we're going to be talking about a really hot topic in scientific publishing. Most months we talk about a paper that's been published in the journal, but we thought this month, because this is such a hot topic and there's so much happening in this space, we'd take a month out to talk about something that's really gaining traction, which is artificial intelligence in science and scientific publishing. I'm delighted to be joined by two senior editors in the ERS family. So Don Sin, my deputy chief editor, and Rory Morty, and I'll let Rory introduce himself now.
Thank you, James. I'm Rory Morty. I'm currently chief editor of the European Respiratory Review, and at the same time, I'm privileged to be an associate editor on the European Respiratory Journal.
It's great for you to join us, Rory, and very interesting time to be having this conversation with so much changing rapidly in our field. So we're hearing loads about AI. There'll be people listening to us who are using it every day. There'll be people joining us who've never engaged with AI in any format. So in your current role as ERR chief editor and as an active scientist, where are you seeing AI being used and what are you seeing in terms of its use in manuscripts and publishing?
AI appears on my radar in two different ways. In the investigative research area, AI is an increasingly powerful tool in clinical medicine and experimental biology, and is used in an experimental sense in my own work, for example, to interpret histopathology or radiological findings, both preclinically and clinically, and also to compare the two, that is, clinical human disease with preclinical models. So there's wonderful scope there in the experimental arena. However, perhaps more germane to this discussion is the use of AI in publishing and peer review, where I've seen it used for both good and bad. The good is in improving grammar and other text elements of a manuscript, where AI, I think, is of immense help to investigators who generally work in languages other than English. AI is also very useful for the generation of schemes and cartoons, for example, for graphical abstracts or other schematics. However, for both applications, the AI output has to be very exhaustively reviewed, as AI can introduce sometimes quite bizarre mistakes. That's on the good side of using AI in publishing. On the bad side, as a reviewer at a variety of journals, not the European Respiratory Journal, I've seen entire manuscripts generated using AI. Initially, these were original research manuscripts and were primarily in preclinical research. However, at the helm of the European Respiratory Review, I now do periodically also encounter review articles that have probably been mostly or entirely generated with AI. For the preclinical original research articles, both the data and the text of the manuscript were created with AI, and thus they were fraudulent, which is, of course, unacceptable in the publishing sense.
Yeah, so good and bad. Don, anything to add to that in terms of what you've been seeing in experiences of AI?
I echo mostly what Rory has said. There are good points and bad points, but let me just focus on some of the concerns. One is the fact that if authors are submitting mostly AI-generated manuscript, one has to question the competence and the skill and knowledge of the authors in that field if they have to rely so much on AI. The second is the whole notion of fairness and equity in publishing. And this has to be factored in when considering what we deem as a generative AI manuscript. It's probably not fair to accept 100% AI-generated manuscript when another similar manuscript may have taken years for authors to generate not only the data, but to write up the paper and undergo extensive peer review. So I think these are important factors to consider in the publishing field.
Yeah, I think it's a very useful tool, isn't it? But the concern is particularly when you're generating components of manuscripts using AI or new text. Firstly, AI struggles to give new insights. It's learning from what's already there in the literature, and so it has a tendency to regurgitate what's already in the literature. So you have concerns about plagiarism because it may regurgitate on the whole things that have already been published, but also it's very unlikely to give new ideas. It's going to repeat what's already there in the literature. The other thing is checking for accuracy, because all of the AI models are improving all the time, but they still hallucinate, make up references to articles or make up scientific facts that are untrue when it can't find data to fill in the gaps of what it's looking for. And that's a huge risk for authors to their scientific credibility if, as we've seen, references appear in manuscripts that don't really exist, for example. That's a nice balanced view, the good and the bad. It's a useful tool, but there are some cautions there. Rory, we get questions about AI at the journal, and a lot of people, I think AI is banned. You're not allowed to use AI in your manuscripts, which is not actually the current policy from ICJME or from the ERS journals. So what is the real position with regard to AI use in scientific publishing?
There is a widely held misconception that AI cannot be used for publishing, and AI certainly is not banned. AI is allowed in publishing, but for very specific purposes. So all journals, including those within the ERS portfolio of publications, issue a very detailed and specific instructions to authors outlining what AI may and may not be used for. Generative AI can be used as a basic writing assistant to help improve the grammar and refine other aspects of the text, and also for formatting of the text and formatting of the tables. AI can also be used to generate elements of the art, so-called clip art images, which make up components of cartoons or schemes. But where you cannot use AI is to create experimental data, unless, of course, the AI output itself is part of the experimental output. You also cannot use AI to enhance, specifically to selectively enhance elements of experimental data output. To help a reviewer and an author to understand the influence that AI may have had on a manuscript, any use of AI in the preparation of a manuscript has to be declared in the acknowledgement section. And although some authors attempt to do so, a generative AI model cannot be an author. So AI is certainly not banned in any sense from publishing, but it can only be used to improve the readability of a manuscript. And again, any changes made by AI should be very, very carefully reviewed for correctness. As you've said, sometimes AI creates references that don't exist and can make rather clumsy mistakes, which serve as a means very quickly of identifying whether or not a manuscript may have been generated using AI. I've also encountered authors using AI to conceal plagiarism in reviews. In other words, to review their or other people's words, which under current ERS publications guidelines is also not permitted. In addition to that, there are concerns about the use of AI by reviewers in the peer review process, but I think we will get to that later.
Yeah, so there's two absolutely key points there. Great points, Rory. The two key points are transparency. If AI is used, it must be declared. So you must include in the acknowledgement section that AI has been used. And the second one is your responsibility as an author. So the AI is not responsible for what's generated. If you submit it, you're responsible for what's on the page, including any mistakes that the generative AI may have produced. So Don, coming to you, what about for peer review? So this is another question that we get, can you plug your paper into a generative AI and ask it to review the paper for you?
We discourage that. Obviously, we as reviewers are in a privileged place when reviewing manuscripts. The authors submit to journal knowing that the paper will be treated with absolute confidentiality and integrity. And so reviewers should not, put in all of the manuscript into a generative AI model and then synthesize a review. However, as with authors, it may be used as a writing assist device to communicate not only to the authors, but to the editors themselves. But this should be disclosed and acknowledged and be as specific as one can be about where the generative AI was deployed. And this will enable the editors to understand the role of AI in the generation of the review and determine whether the use was appropriate or inappropriate, as we have encountered in some cases.
Anything to add, Rory?
I can only echo what Donna said. I think that they're very important points. I personally do not use AI to review papers. If I'm reviewing in my own field of expertise, I don't see the need. I have a look at a paper and immediately as I start reading it, critiques and et cetera come to mind. However, I do understand that if a reviewer is particularly pressed for time early in the reviewing game or uncomfortable with the subject matter, a reviewer might be inclined to use AI. But that being the case, AI might be used for literature searches or to get a grasp of the current state of the art in the field. But under no circumstances should a confidential manuscript be uploaded to an AI platform for analysis. Generative AI models can use anything that a reviewer uploads for training, which would be a breach of confidentiality as a reviewer. A reviewer should not share anything about a confidential manuscript without permission.
Yeah, so that's very, very clear. The review itself should not be generated by AI. We're asking the individual to review the paper, not for them to put it through a computer system. So I think that's very, very clear. And that's hopefully something everybody would agree with. So I think the last question would be, this is a rapidly developing situation. Where do you think we're going to be in 5 years in terms of how AI is going to change scientific publishing? I know it's a difficult question because it's a moving target, Rory, but where do you think we'll be in 5 years?
Well, it is developing at lightning speed, so it's going to go in a lot of very interesting places, particularly with respect to publishing. I mean, I think what we do have is an arms race. We have AI being used for a lot of things, good and bad, and we have efforts to detect AI use. I think the detection lags behind the development of generative AI models. I think a lot of work in the future is going to focus on how we can detect the use of AI. AI is very powerful. Of course, there's a massive amount of processing capacity behind it. There may come a time when a generative AI can generate a better review on a topic than one of us can. Let's see if we get there. It might put us all out of business. But, when it comes to investigative research, analyzing data, I still think it's a long way off before AI can truly replace an experienced scientist's or clinician's brain.
Yeah, I don't think we're there yet, Rory, but I do wonder if I'll be out of a job because AI will be much better at spotting papers that are going to be highly read and cited than we will as editors. Don, last word to you. Where do you think we're heading?
Well, I think that, as Rory indicated, the performance of generative AI will be significantly improved, maybe even to a point where the manuscript or the paper feels extremely natural. So I think the publishing companies and editors must be, I think, extremely vigilant about the widespread use and deployment of AI in paper generation and manuscript generation in general. The big concern I have about the use of generative AI in the medical field, and this spans beyond the publishing world, is the de-skilling of our young people who are aspiring to be scientists or clinician scientists. It's great to use some assistance from AI to generate nice manuscripts, but one still has to understand the experimental process and the outputs. So for instance, we still have to understand what a p-value means, not just to generate a number, and what a relative risk is or a hazard ratio, and so on, and the difference. By relying so much on AI going forward, I worry that the next generation of scientists will not have those skills, and we will have a bunch of numbers and narratives that could be potentially misleading. So I think this is a warning to not just the medical publishing field, but to medical education field, that the use of AI must be, I think, curtailed to a certain extent and honed in to enhance medical education, not to diminish it.
That's a very important warning. I'm going to finish by saying, because there's a few warnings there and the potential of finishing on a negative. The positive is this certainly looks like it will be very time-saving for a lot of those things that we do, cutting words out of manuscripts, reformatting for different journals, etc. I'm hoping that AI will help with the less fun bits of being an academic and free us up to do the real science, which is the stuff that you're talking about, Don. So we finish as we began, which is to say there's going to be good and bad. But hopefully for the listeners to this podcast, some of the tips that we've given you will help in terms of thinking about how you can safely and appropriately incorporate AI into your scientific workflows. Thanks so much for joining us for the ERJ podcast this month. As a reminder, we do this every month. Please do join us every month for updates from the ERJ.